I'm with two absolutely amazing people when it comes to Bitcoin and Bitcoin mining, and we're going to do the panel with Bitcoin mining and energy grid challenges and opportunities. So I'm the CEO of Bitcoin Policy UK and a journalist, and I focus on Bitcoin energy and policy. I've written about the intersection of Bitcoin and energy and trying to counteract the FUD along with you guys. And I've researched the most amazing projects, people, and energy solutions. So I would like my amazing panel with Dr. Matthias Hafner and Daniel Batten. Please, would you introduce yourselves?
Thanks, Susie. Well, I am a climate tech investor who looked at about 200 different forms of climate technology, really searching for things that could decarbonize fast. Someone introduced me to Bitcoin mining. I was very skeptical to start with, but after doing due diligence on it, I concluded that it was one of the absolute keys, if not an integral key, to solving some of our net zero emission targets.
Thank you. Then I think it's my turn. My name is Matthias. I'm an economist. I'm leading the Center for Cryptoeconomics, which is a research and consultancy company in Switzerland. We provide also economic consultants and research since 2015. Basically, we help designing tokens for the projects, but also mainly with on Ethereum and other blockchains, but also with Bitcoin. We work together with startups, corporates, and governments. And lately, we did also some research for the German government on the footprint of Bitcoin.
Amazing, thank you. So this is going to be a fantastic panel. So we should start off with Bitcoin's proof of work is often criticized for its energy use, but is the conversation too narrowly focused on consumption rather than opportunity? Daniel, would you like to go first?
I look at the world through the lens of a climate tech investor, and every single investment I've made or anyone has made always starts off having a carbon footprint. Solar had a carbon footprint, in fact, was emission positive for the first 57 years of its advent. Wind, same thing. Direct air capture, same thing. Bitcoin mining, same thing. So we have to take a wide angle lens and ask not just does it have a carbon footprint today, because if that's our metric, then we would have banned anything that could have been really net positive for the environment. We have to look at well, how is it trending? So I look at two things: what's its emission debt, and how much time is it going to take to pay off that footprint? And when you look at Bitcoin, it's very clear to me that if you look at all its decarbonizing benefits, it can not only pay off its emission debt, but it can be part of the green energy transition and also mitigating methane around the world.
Yeah, methane mitigation is a huge one because you work even on landfill sites, don't you? I mean, so you're basically capturing something that's harmful and turning it into another revenue stream.
Correct. The key thing with Bitcoin is there are other technologies that could do it. You could sell it to the grid, you could do something else, but the key is, can you do it practically, logistically, and profitably? And that's where Bitcoin mining is very often the one technology that fronts up without needing government subsidies. So we're very excited about it.
Matthias, would you like to have a crack at this question?
Yeah, sure. So I think it's also, as you said before, like obviously, if we talk about, so we only talk about the costs, which is kind of strange. We only talk about the costs of Bitcoin and not the benefits. And obviously, it needs to be also talked about the benefits of Bitcoin itself, but also when Bitcoin can be used for benefiting the environment. So methane is one of the examples. I think this is one thing that is very important to note in this discussion. And the other thing, which I think is totally strange, basically, that discussion is totally wrong to my view, because why do we talk about the regulation of a very, very specific innovation? I think it's an important innovation, but it's still a very, very specific innovation, and try to target only this one. So why do we need to make this judgment, or why do governments or politicians need to make this judgment between the costs and benefits? And this should be to the markets, and there should be regulation, but not specifically for Bitcoin, but like for the overall market to address issues.
Because it's interesting what we put value on and what we're happy to spend electricity on, for example, Christmas lights or tumble dryers. So it depends if you value the thing that you're actually using the energy for. And I think that a large part of this issue comes from a general misunderstanding of Bitcoin. But Bitcoin miners are increasingly aligning with low cost and renewable energy. In practical terms, what does this kind of relocation actually benefit the grid, and when does it not?
Well, if you look at the way that Bitcoin mining has really proliferated its sustainable energy use over the last 4 years, it's quite extraordinary. It went from, in 2021, using more fossil fuel than a standard electrified technology on the grid, to, in 2025, using over 56% sustainable energy. So that's more than any other user of energy. What's more important than that, though, is because of its flexible way that it uses energy, it's been shown in numerous peer-reviewed studies and white papers and in case studies as well, that if you have a flexible user of energy, it helps the grid operator to build out the grid using more variable renewable energy. Whereas if you have an inflexible user of energy, such as an AI inference data center, then the grid operator has to build up more fossil fuel, more baseload energy. So it has tremendous advantages in terms of getting more renewables onto the grid. And then once it's on the grid, counterbalancing the intermittency of variable renewable energy. So grid operators don't have to resort to practices such as using a gas peaker plant as backup when the sun goes behind a cloud or when the wind is blowing.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Would you like to take this one?
Yeah, maybe if I want to add here, I think what's also important is like, so it helps to balance the grid if the miner is not constantly running. So, and this is basically this flexibility Daniel also pointed out. And I think that's also where we're going to see how strong Bitcoin can benefit the grid or not, and basically how also how beneficial or profitable it is for miners to turn off their miner during peaks of demand, energy demand, or vice versa. Basically, having a miner at some site, energy site, to turn it on when there is excess demand.
But there are even times when miners have been paid to take the energy because they provide such a useful service. I think a couple of last August or the August before, I think Iron may have received 8 cents per kilowatt hour to mine. So that they not only got paid to take the energy, but they also got paid for the Bitcoin. So it can be a very useful service.
Yes, totally.
Basically,
yes,
with a grid operator, what you don't like is extremes. So when prices go extremely high or prices go extremely low, what that's saying is that the grid is in danger of being unstable, either because there's not enough demand, and that's when prices go low or even negative. I mean, prices go very high, that's saying that there's excessive demand. And so that's the situations where it's very hard to stabilize a grid, increasingly with more variable renewable energy and more extreme climate events. And Bitcoin is able to help with both cases. So when electricity demand is high, they can throttle down their consumption. But when the supply is high and there's not many users, they can soak up that additional energy because the grid can actually be unstable through not just too much demand, but not enough demand. And Bitcoin helps at both ends of that wave.
Yeah, it's pretty genius, isn't it? Love Bitcoin mining. Yeah. So with regards to demand side response and specifically with stranded and flared gas, what examples have we seen where this has worked, and are these models economically sustainable long term?
Yes, absolutely. So I think the best use cases that we have seen for Bitcoin or for the environment is flaring, as there is not yet a greener alternative. We had a lot of discussion whether it's not also possible to, for example, use this flaring or this excess gas, burn it down and use it for hydrogen energy. But like this is just not practical today. And so the question is that it has a huge impact. But I think Daniel here can also give here a good view on this topic.
Right now at the moment, if you're on an oil field and you strike oil, you also strike natural gas. And there's usually not anything productive you can do with that gas. It's too far from a gas pipeline. So it simply gets flared. The issue there is, apart from that being a terrible waste of energy, is that the flaring is incomplete. Only 91% gets burnt. And you might say, well, that sounds pretty good. But the problem is that methane over a 20-year period is 84 times more warming to the atmosphere than carbon dioxide. So even a 9% discharge is an environmental hazard, which is why a number of NGOs and environmental watchdog groups around the world have moved to end the practice of flaring. And on landfills, it's even worse, because in many parts of the world, it's not even flared, not even burned. It just simply vents into the atmosphere. And so 100% of the methane is emitted. And landfills are never in the right place. Oil fields are never in the right place to be able to do anything productive with that energy, or sell it to the grid, or transport it through a pipeline. So you really need a user of energy who's able to remotely locate, and there's very few of them. And the ones that are, it doesn't make any sense for them to spend all that money chasing that cheap electricity. But because Bitcoin mining companies uniquely have 80% of their operational cost being power, they're the only one who's prepared to spend that additional capital expense to chase that cheap stranded energy from oil fields and from landfills. And so it's performing an incredibly viable function to soak up some of that methane that otherwise would have been contributing to climate change.
God, I can't believe that sometimes they don't even flare it.
In landfills, most parts of the world, it's not even flared, it just vents. It's not even regulated. It's only in Europe and some parts of the States and a few other handful of places in the world that it's regulated that you have to even burn it. It's a huge problem.
Yeah, incredible that Bitcoin mining can just come up and mop up all that stranded energy. I suppose I know there's a capex cost attached to that, so it's not always viable. And the size of the site is obviously going to be, you can't do it everywhere, unfortunately. But do you actually see a time when it is possible to put little mini Bitcoin mining hubs, and you could just remotely move them around and the capex cost wouldn't be prohibitive?
Well, there's 5 Bitcoin mining companies who have already moved into the area of landfill gas mitigation. And we were so excited about it that we decided we wanted to finance more of this being done, because number one, it's a great source of energy for Bitcoin mining because it's very cheap. Secondly, while there is an additional capex cost, because Bitcoin mining companies have 80% of their power, 80% of their OPEX is power, they can generally get a return on that capex within 3 years, whereas a traditional data center would take more like 8 years, which is why Bitcoin mining companies are best suited to doing this. So we see more of this happening, not just on landfills, but on oil fields as well, and also in farms in the future. So it's tremendously exciting. And it only takes 35 mid-sized landfills using this form of Bitcoin mining who are currently venting their methane emissions, and that's enough to offset the entire emissions of the entire Bitcoin network.
Incredible. So what is the role of decentralized mining, and under what circumstances is relocating or using green energy beneficial, and when is it not?
Yeah. So here I think the first thing is important is that like Bitcoin mining is decentralized, and therefore it's a global topic, and so is the environmental impact, or everything that impacts the environment. So we need to talk about global effects of this decentralized technology. And what we have seen, like in the past, that some regulators try to regulate it on a local level, not on a global. And what happens then is basically that, so if you, for example, forbid it in one place, then because Bitcoin is decentralized and the incentives are also decentralized, it just moves to another area. We have seen that, for example, with China. China put restriction on mining. So what happened is basically not that this mining was not there anymore. This mining just moved to another location, and also to the States, amongst other. And now basically, from that perspective, it's always the question, where is the energy mix greener? If you look at the energy mix, at least the old or at the new location. So it might also hurt if you put some local restrictions, because it might go to a place where the mix is worse. I think this is very important. That we also see is basically that when it moves to places where there is a huge potential for green energy, and that's basically the best outcome you can have. So when it doesn't substitute other projects, so to say, and then it really increases renewable energy production.
Daniel?
Energy is moving to a more decentralized way of operating. If we look at For example, and I'm talking around the world, not just in the West here, if we want to deliver energy abundance to areas which currently are in energy poverty, there are 800 million people around the world who have no access to electricity at all. 600 million of them are in Africa. And for them, it doesn't make sense to have these large centralized grids, microgrids, clean, green, microgrids are the answer. But they make no economic sense unless you have a customer for that energy when the village is using them. And so Bitcoin's been an incredible way to proliferate the development of these microgrids. In the West, it's more about, it doesn't make sense to have massive pockets of generation that are a long, long way away from where the energy is consumed, because as we've discovered, to upgrade the grids so that you can transport that energy is prohibitively expensive. And so what makes more sense is to have smaller pockets of energy generation, more distributed. And Bitcoin mining can really support this, because when you have a new solar project or a new wind project, Bitcoin mining can be that first customer even before it gets interconnected to the grid, which makes it more profitable. And what do they do with that excess profit? They plow it back into expanding their wind operation. There was actually a paper done recently that showed that not only is Bitcoin mining helping the decarbonization of the grid, but when you have more Bitcoin mining flexible load on the grid, it means you don't have to invest prohibitive amounts of money in upgrading the grid to handle the additional variable renewable load. So it's actually saving money as well.
There's so many advantages. It is one of those rare situations where it's win-win-win sometimes. I wish the UK government would wake up and actually start paying attention. But with moving on to regulatory and cultural attitudes towards Bitcoin and mining worldwide, what needs to change for more countries to embrace sustainable mining practices and innovation? Would you like to speak to our government, please?
I think Matthias made a very good point before, which is that it makes no sense to evaluate an asset by only looking at the cost side of the ledger. So, and unfortunately, governments have made a habit of doing this, which would have resulted in solar being banned, wind being banned, direct air capture being banned. It's also the sort of philosophy, it's akin to saying, let's assess the health of our economy by looking at our expenses. Let's assess the health of this business by only looking at its expenses and costs and liabilities, but not looking at its assets. It makes no sense, or its revenue. So in the same way with Bitcoin, we have to look at the environmental costs, which all technologies have. We have to look at the benefits, and then we have to have an objective assessment about the net balance. And then we also have to look at the trajectory. So policymakers and regulators would do well to take a more objective approach, a more long-term approach, and basically a more common sense approach to Bitcoin, which does, my rule of thumb is, if any technology, or rather any methodology for evaluating a technology would have resulted in solar being regulated out of existence, it's probably not a good methodology.
Absolutely. So we've got 2 minutes left. Would you like to close? Either one of you. Have you got any final thoughts that you would like to share just in the last 2 minutes?
The only thing I'll say is that there's basically 4 ways that Bitcoin is essential, not only for energy decarbonization, but also for energy security. And so the left tend to care more about energy conservation and sustainability. The political right tend to care more about energy security, but Bitcoin allows you to have both.
Perfect.
Yeah, I can totally agree with that point, and I think just use Bitcoin as one of many different technologies, and don't be too picky on one of it, and because you will lose, or the governments will forget about the benefits and overestimate any costs.
What do you mean by being picky?
Or just looking at the costs, basically, or just not focusing on a specific innovation, just keep it as one innovation of many innovations, and let's keep it there, and not try to picky on this one single innovation.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and it is funny how they focus on Bitcoin mining specifically when there are so many other incredible wastes wastes of energy. Well, thank you so much. And this is one of my favorite subjects, as you know, and I think that probably concludes it, unless you have anything you'd like to add.
One final thing, in 2021, people said that Bitcoin mining wastes energy, but in 2025, we've actually realized that the failure to mine Bitcoin results in huge amounts of energy being wasted.
It's an energy solution. Perfect. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.